topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
What's working on purpose anyway? Each week, we ponder the answer to this question. People ache for meaning and purpose at work, to contribute their talents passionately and know their lives really matter. They crave being part of an organization that inspires them and helps them grow into realizing their highest potential. Business can be such a force for good in the world, elevating humanity. In our program, we provide guidance and inspiration to help usher in this world we all want, working on purpose. Now, here's your host, Dr. Elise Cortez.
Welcome back to the Working on Purpose program. Thanks for tuning in again this week. Great to have you. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, joining you live from Dallas, Texas, which is home base for me. If you don't know me yet, I'm a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, organizational logotherapist, inspirational speaker, social scientist, and author. My team and I help companies discover and articulate their purpose to thread it through culture and operations. We work with forward-thinking or forward-reaching organizations to develop inspirational leaders who create cultures where people actually want to come to work and do their best. And we provide programs that enable individual team members and leaders to discover and unleash their passion and purpose at work to catalyze the fulfillment, engagement, and productivity. You'll learn more about us and how we can work together at EliseCortez.com. With us today is Dr. Marie Gervais. She is the CEO of Shift Management, Inc., specializing in helping people grow into supervisory and managerial positions and build their leadership confidence and skills to support their teams in meeting business objectives effectively. She's the host of the Culture and Leadership Connections podcast, where she interviews leaders in various professions, and she's the author of The Spirit of Work, a recently released book, which we'll be talking about today on the show. Joining us today from Edmonton, Canada, Dr. Gervais, welcome to Working on Purpose.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
It's delightful to make your acquaintance and be part of this wave to continue to raise consciousness around the world. I'm delighted to have you on.
Thank you.
So first, let's talk a little bit about what you do for work. You may not know this about me, but I have been long researching meaning and work and identity, I guess a good 25 years. And so, what we choose to do and what it means to us is important. So let's just start with what it is that you do at Shift Management. What is it, the work that you do, and why is it important to you?
At Shift Management, I offer training and also coaching for middle and upper management for leadership. And it is a holistic approach to leadership and mostly offered to technical professions and people who are very good at operations, are promoted up from operations and know how to manage stuff, but not necessarily people. Mm-hmm. So it's important for me because I'm pretty good at translating a technical approach into a people approach so that you can speak the language of both. And I think that much of what's already offered currently for leadership development is either too generic or too dumbed down for the middle and upper management. There's a lot of good stuff for the C-suite level, but not much for that middle level. And that's where the rubber hits the road. And that's also where I get to have my ear to the ground and listen to what's going on in people's work realities. So I hear from the people in the middle, I hear from their grassroots experience of the frontline workers and also how they're experiencing their managers.
Another thing we have in common, Dr. Marie, and that is that I have usually worked with more technical audiences myself, scientists, engineers, IT people as well. I love them. I love their brilliance, and I love helping them stretch and read over more into the, if you will, softer skills of the work enterprise that we have that in alignment.
So yes, I'm actually looking forward to reading I've only just recently become acquainted with your books, but I'm looking forward to reading them.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I am working on my next book as well. It's coming out late this year. It's called The Great Revitalization, but yeah, it's such a great way to learn, right? Continue to write books. So we'll be in this together for a while, my dear.
I think so.
And speaking of that, we have to talk about your brand new book, The Spirit of Work. So first, I want to understand, why did you write the book and why now? Why not 10 years ago? Why not 5 years ago? Why now?
Well, here it is.
It's beautiful. It's so beautiful. Isn't it great to hold it in your hand?
Yeah, the reason I'm showing it to you is because you were supposed to get it in the mail, but it wasn't because of the supply chain shortages around the world. The
Mm.
paper was an issue and things didn't get mailed out as quickly as they would have because of that. So the reason I've been thinking about writing the book for many years, for about 10 years probably, but it felt really more and more urgent just prior to COVID. And then I don't know, it just started getting it down and, writing it and getting it out there, and as I did it, I realized that I didn't know as much as I thought I did, and I had to learn a lot from the research, and the research just gave me the taste to want to do more, and it became more and more pertinent as the pandemic and the environmental issues and the wars started to emerge more and more, and I thought, yeah, people really really need this. They need the message in the book, they need the practical tools in the book, and they need the underlying purpose of it.
Yes, and as we said before we got on air together, I certainly feel just a strong, palpable sensation of the lifting of consciousness in the world and how that is threading over and spilling into the world of business undeniably and irrevocably. We can't go back. You can't put the genie back in the bottle anymore. And I'm so aware of that escalating shift. And I keep meeting more and more people who I've been having on the radio show that are addressing it in some form or fashion, including you.
Yes, the shift is there. People are still going to resist it until their last breath, until they have to start acting on it, because you can have a realization about something, but you may not have figured out how to make that happen in your life or in your company.
It's so true, which we're going to delve into that as we go through some of the key aspects from your chapters. But before we get into that, one of the things I want to recognize and celebrate about the work that you did, Dr. Gervais, is that you also incorporate perspectives from various religions. The reason I think that's important is I appreciate that that brings us together versus maybe just observing and talking from a singular religion. It might be more divisive. So what was it about talking about and looking at things from various religions for you?
Well, I started the book with the idea that we would look at sacred texts from the world religions to see what they have to say about work. And then I thought, well, I have a lot of background in what does science have to contribute to this, and then also the business world, because having worked with probably 100 plus companies and over 500 managers, I have some good insights and great stories. And I thought, what if I put all of that together? And I don't think I've seen that done quite in this way before, because people typically have a particular, either they have no religious slant, or they have a spiritual not religious slant, or religious not spiritual slant, or they have an atheist slant, or they just have a let's just deal with the basic slant. And so I found that the sacred texts of the world religions have a lot to tell us about work. And if we had even just used one of the principles that was in any of them, we would be way farther ahead as a civilization.
That's gorgeous, Dr. Gervais. Just gorgeous. And certainly from my vantage point, somebody who is a voracious reader and loves to learn, have spent my whole life, with a craving, driven to learn, that there's something to learn from all of those religions, something to celebrate and learn and stand on and glimpse the world newly through by looking through those different faiths.
Well, they're the same chapters of one book. Everybody walking up the mountain from a different spot, you end up at the top.
Mm-hmm. That's
Now,
so great.
when you take it from the perspective of unity and diversity, and with the idea that different messengers come to different people at different times, depending on when that culture needs it most. Now we're at a national, global perspective, and maybe the next perspective will be the solar system.
That's so fascinating.
Hmm.
One of the ways that I've come to view religion, just quickly before I get into some of the chapters of your book, is I've come to view religions of the world as the unique languages that peoples gather together to try to make sense of their world. And so, to your point, we're all trying to get up that mountain. But the way that we're describing it is through our own vantage point of language, et cetera, that comes with all the metaphors and things that are meaningful to that and expressed in a way that makes sense to us as a group, as a community, which the easiest way for that I can think about that is language.
I do really like that language insight. May I offer another one?
Please, please. That's why
So,
you're here.
religion is intended to change culture. So there's a special messenger that comes to some culture at some period of time in history, and they're terribly persecuted and they suffer greatly. Often they're put to death. And that messenger comes with a message that is eternal. And so
Mm.
it's intended to change culture, and it does once it starts reaching a point of critical mass in the culture, at which point the culture starts to take over and impose culture on the religion. And
Mm.
then what people think is religion isn't. It's cultural underpinnings and then overpinnings that have just been evolving over time. And so the actual reality of the sacred texts gets a little lost and muddied in all of that. And that's why we have all those different sects. And that's why
Mm.
we have division and controversy. But when you look at the essential messages, you know, um, do unto others as you'd have done unto yourself, the golden rule, pray, have a spiritual life, and be of service to humanity, discover your talents and virtues. All of those things are woven throughout all of the sacred texts, but they have a different cultural context, which evolves over time. And eventually that cultural context starts to really put the religion in the shadow of it. And so I thought if I go back to the sacred texts and some of the um, primary teachings and say, look at the gems of these realities and what do they have to tell us, that might help us to get out of the current mess that we're in.
Mm. Oh, that was worth the price of admission right there, Dr. Gervais. Thank you for that. Brilliant. And the insight there, there's so much level of insight. Great that this is a recorded show. People can listen to it over and over again to get more insight out of that. And this is really maybe perhaps related to that. This next piece that I wanted to address from your book, you say rationality, relationality, harmony, unity, and equality are what have been missing from the workplace since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. This book is an attempt to begin rectifying that oversight. Say more about that. That's quite alluring right there. A singular sentence that says so much.
Well, as humanity, if you think about people, human beings starting to just interact with their environment and with each other, and they were creating tools, and those tools, as soon as they had the opportunity, started to make those beautiful and started to attribute meaning to the things that were around them, and then eventually out of the survival into either hunters or gatherers, and those kinds of organizations of societies had evolved certain kinds of hierarchies, and eventually certain people in each community started to have wealth, and that's when we began to have problems. If some had wealth and others didn't, and some had power and they could impose it in a negative way on other people, not like the power of love or the power of unity, but the power over dominating another person. And that then developed into eventually what we got, which was the Industrial Revolution, where a few people at the top could choose to use people as if they were commodities. And the whole school system and prison systems around the world were all based on the ideas of the Industrial Revolution. It started with agriculture and then moved into um, making sure that people would be good factory workers and we can keep them in their place, which is constrictive, does not allow the human spirit to advance or contribute, and allows a few to benefit and a lot to be living in grinding misery.
That was incredibly succinct, and I'm in complete and full alignment with that assessment and evaluation, and very grateful to live in 2022 today, where, as far as I can tell, it is the workplace of the employee that is demanding meaning and purpose, and that there is, as you say, people will resist. Many leaders will resist the call towards spirituality and more of a conscious approach to leadership and business, and they will probably be left behind. So I'm very grateful for all the advancement that has taken place over these years, and yet still there's work to be done, which is why you and I are doing what we're doing today. So from here, what I'd like to do is I'd like to be able to queue up a few things from your book and have you discuss some of the things that you wrote. I'd like to be able to read directly some of the passages from your book just to keep the integrity of the message, and then have you talk from that. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is this notion of learning to read reality rather than imposing limited beliefs upon it. So you say in your book, when we expand our view of human nature to that of unlimited potential for good, organically interacting within ecosystems of relationships to the spirit of work, all of creation, we learn to read reality rather than impose limited beliefs upon it. Within this paradigm, we can envision a noble human being with unlimited gifts and powers, combined with increased ability to accurately read and respond appropriately to social realities. It is at this point of possibility that healthy, sustained transformation at both the individual and organizational levels becomes not only possible, but normal. Sounds good to me.
So just a little caveat, the concept of reading reality comes from the Baha'i faith.
Okay.
And it's the idea, and that it was expressed also about 40 years ago by Jacques Descartes, who talked about from a United Nations perspective that there are different kinds of literacies, and that we have the literacy of reading and writing is and numeracy are only two literacies, and that the most important literacy that we need in order to build the human race to be a human race instead of just what it is now, into what it was intended to be, is to learn to read social realities around us. So that's also another person who used that perspective. So being able to read a social reality means that you have to observe it, you have to suspend judgment, and you have to assume that whatever lens you have is incorrect and incomplete data, and therefore you don't have the necessary data to make an accurate decision. So that impels or compels one to seek information from people, to be curious about what their experience is, and to be interested in how that experience affects you and how your experience affects them. And what we have now is people still trying to kill each other who are different from them.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's when we look back, in 1,000 years, we're going to say, how could we have been so barbarous?
Yes. Even today, I think, how could we have been so barbarous?
How are we still
How
so
are we
barbarous?
still? Yes.
That
Mhm.
we seek to harm and to kill our own species, the planet on which we live, and ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
There's no other equivalent in nature.
I want to translate that for our listeners and viewers a little bit here, and you chime in, please, if you would, if you see it differently. But the way that I see that, as that carries over what she's been talking about, is the importance as leaders, as managers, as supervisors, to be able to suspend your surety that you know what's going on and what you see in another human being, to instead step back and be curious and believe that you don't know there is all there is to know about the situation or the purpose, and be curious and open to something new and unfolding that you could have never imagined. That is the opportunity for change and transformation.
Great translation.
Okay, good. Well,
I have a good story about that, but I don't know if this is a good time to say it.
well,
It's
let's
from the
hold
book.
that story. Hold that story. We love stories, and let's hold that for after our first break.
Okay.
A good way to go into a first break. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We've been on here with Dr. Marie Gervais. She's the author of The Spirit at Work. We've been talking just a bit about her background, what got her to write this book. We're going to continue the conversation about the contents of the book, starting with that story she just queued up. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to the program. Before we get back into the contents, let me point out and invite you to check out my book, Purpose Ignited, How Inspiring Leaders Ignite Passion, Elevate Cause. I wrote it in late 2020 with the invitation to awaken readers to their passion and purpose and turn them into inspirational leaders. I hope you'll find it useful. I use it as a basis for the content for my programs. If you're just joining us now, my guest is Dr. Marie Gervais. She's the CEO of Shift Management, Inc., and the host of the Culture and Leadership Connections podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. So you teased us just before the beginning of the last break with a story. Do tell. We love stories.
Well, it's the idea that we only know what we know, and what we know is limited, and being humble enough to accept that. So I was working with a set of plants, so 7 different plants. I was working with their plant managers, all of the their upper managers there and their middle managers. And we were doing some training, and one of them was that they had to roll out something that they were doing in communication with their team. And one of the plant managers said, "Well, why would I do that? Because the reason I'm the plant manager is I'm the smartest person in the room,
Oh,
and I have, I have the training and the thinking skills, and my teams don't." And so I said, "Well, that's the homework. So see what you find out when you do communicate an idea to a group of people." And he said, "Well, I have a rollout plan. I'll just tell them about it and they'll see how good it is." So he did. And within a few minutes of him starting to roll it out, people were saying, "Well, here's a problem with the rollout. Here's another issue. Have you considered this? Well, from my perspective, this could be an issue." And within a few minutes, he had 11 flaws to his apparently perfect program. And so he was stunned and he said, "Okay, listen, you tell me what should be the next step so that we can roll this out." It was a complete change of things in the plant. What would be the next step so we can do this as smoothly as possible with the least amount of hiccups and cost? And so they said, "Well, we would go and talk to our supervisors." And he goes, "Well, why? They don't speak English fluently." And they said, "Well, we have ways to get around that. They're translators and we communicate with each other well. We've got it figured out and we'll come back to you with what they discovered." So they came back and they said, we realized the employees had some really good suggestions and we discovered quite a few more issues that we can solve by putting all of these ideas together. And the other thing that came up is that the employees don't really understand the numbers. They don't know why they're supposed to input certain things, and when it comes out and they give it to somebody else, they don't know what that does. And so we decided we'd tell them how to affect the numbers. How can they make things go up and down with efficiencies? How can they make things go up and down with shipping? How can they make things go up and down with productivity and with profit? And they were very excited about it. And within a few weeks, they were they were seeing huge effects in the plant. So they had cut costs. They had they had less absenteeism. They had people very excited about coming to work. They had a whole lot of things improved. This was before they even did the rollout. They had a whole lot of rework was pretty much went down to nothing and stayed that way. They had no damage when they were shipping. All sorts of things changed because they saw that they could affect for the good and that they had a purpose in the company and that their purpose and that their role was really important. And they started teaching their friends and relatives in other plants.
mm,
And so what happened was the company saw huge benefits. And the plant manager was really tickled. And he said, "When we rolled this out, it's the best rollout we've ever done. And I learned that what I know is only what I know." So he gained humility from that. And he gained
yeah.
perspective from that. It was really good for him. But there is a sad part of this story too, and that is that, and which isn't in the book, but I'm telling you that I was fired from that project
Mm.
because the C-suite got scared when they saw how well things were going, when people knew what they were doing and had purpose and agency. And they realized they'd have to make some changes too, and they weren't ready for it.
Mm. That indicates, that constriction mentality that you were
Yeah.
talking about, right? We need to control things. We need to be in charge of things. When we unleash human beings, there's a lot of unpredictability to that. And I can certainly see that. I'm really grateful that you told us the rest of that story, Dr. Marie, because it is, what we're talking about here, ladies and gentlemen, is the real stuff. We are pushing the envelope. We are asking you, inviting you to raise to a higher level of your consciousness, your possibility in this world. And it's not for the faint of heart.
No.
So thank you, Dr. Marie.
Yeah. It's easy to get threatened at whatever stage or place you are in the whole context.
And that tells you that you're on to something, right?
Mhm.
Now you've touched the fire. So, this is good. So, all right, well, let's keep going here. So the next piece that I want to cue up from another chapter here speaks to also this notion we've been kind of starting to talk to, and that's the expression of our souls. So again, reading from your book, you say, "The reason spirit matters so much for work is that human beings need to work as an expression of our souls." Yes. Our own mysterious ability to aim webs of meaning. Work provides human beings with a sense of purpose that comes from doing what we were created to do: learn, grow, develop, contribute to building something bigger and better than ourselves as individuals, communities, and institutions. If that purpose is lost, our souls are at first dissatisfied, then distressed. We feel like hungry people who eat but never have our hunger sated. Mm. And we wonder why people are literally walking through life dead, who are going through the motions, and if they do reach, they get their hands slapped. And yet, just to the story that you said before, Dr. Marie, that of what happens when you actually unleash human beings, what they can do is incredible.
Yeah, one of the chapters in the book is called Bring Your Mind to Work. So there are
Hmm.
5 themes in the book. One is, bring your soul to work, bring your heart to work, bring your body to work, bring your mind to work. And then you are bringing your community to work. Do you know who you're bringing? And so when you bring your mind to work, that doesn't mean just the people who have an education who bring their minds to work. It doesn't mean the people who have the most credentials after their name who do that. And so in that chapter, I show 2 very different people in the same company who brought their minds to work and what that brought to the company and brought to them. And one was very distressed, lived in foster homes all his life, felt that he had no people skills, no abilities to solve problems. And he actually brought his mind to work and was able to really shine in ways that he didn't think possible previously. And
Mm.
the other one already came with a really great skill set and really great collaborative skills and was able to empower others to do the same. So they're both really great stories, 2 different people.
Well, I'm curious as we talk about this, this has become very much the water that I swim in, Dr. Marie, this whole notion of meaning and purpose. I have been championing this stuff. Gosh, I mean, I've been hosting my show for 7 years. I've been researching meaning and purpose for 10 plus 25 years, whatever it's been. To me, this is just so obvious. But I also know, and I've been around the block a couple of times, so I also know that there's a good, huge contingent of people out there who think this is ridiculous, especially when we start using that 4-letter word in the world of work being soul.
Mhm.
So I'm curious, with your vast experience here, what are you encountering when you start talking about some of these concepts that are in this book to more conservative organizations? What are you hearing? How are they responding?
Well, the book's only been out for a week.
But I'm guessing you've been saying some of this language for a while, though.
I have. And I'd say that as I wrote the book, I became bolder in the way that I was expressing it. And so, um, let me give you an example. So I had a group of supervisors and managers who were working for an oil and gas company, and they were very distressed when they came onto the Zoom meeting for us to do something because somebody had just died at work. Well, a couple of days ago, someone had died, and they were very much reeling from that. And they also all had personal issues happening in their lives, and they were so distressed. And one of the supervisors said, "This is just all crap, and I just don't, I don't have time for this. I'm a busy person. I've got a father with Alzheimer's. I've got 2 sons with disabilities." And he starts to say these things, and I said, "Wow, you really do have no time, do you?" And he said, "I sure don't. I don't have time for you, and I don't have time for this course, and I don't have time for the coaching." And I said, "Well, do you have time to take one breath?" And he said, yeah." So I said, "Well, let's just do that. All of us at the same time. We just take one breath in and blow it out. Let's do it together." They just settled right down. And then this fellow said, "Sorry about that. Let's keep going."
Isn't it amazing? Well, so
You don't
go ahead.
always have to speak soul. But I
Right.
have been now saying, really, this is a spiritual problem. And if we don't address it at the soul level, then everything else that we do is just going to continue to go wrong. Here's an example from the development um, of distributing distributing development in developing countries, where
Mm.
people go and they have all these great projects that sound really good, where they're going to just distribute the wealth and make abundance happen, and they distribute it, and people just devolve back to whatever they were doing before. Whatever water wells or schools were established just are disintegrated because there was no purpose. There was no consultation. There was no engaging people with their own spiritual impetus and asking the questions about where the strengths are in the community that they can build on. And when they're ready for it, what challenges are we facing that we can address? And because that process never happened, all this stuff that happened on the outside just fell apart. So it's the same with workplaces.
Mhm. Two things on that come to mind. First, what you were talking about with bringing development into developing countries. Right. If we don't thread through what the purpose is into the community, you lose that fabric. And so it becomes a single piece of fabric instead of an actual piece of garment. Is my first thing that I would say about that is you lose the ability to connect that up and stitch it together and bring it up. And then the second thing that I was thinking about is when you were talking about, you don't have to use the word soul to actually make this work happen. I was very present to the compassion that you offered this man. Right. So when you could be present in a conversation like that without feeling defensive, without getting defensive, feeling defensive, and literally meeting him where he was on his spiritual level and inviting him to come into your what you wanted to do with him and his group. I mean, that's the opportunity. So one of the things that I'm always aware of, Dr. Marie, and I say it in my management leadership trainings, is the importance of being able to meet people where they are to open a conversation. Otherwise, you're just miscommunicating, right? And that's what you did, right? You went and met him where he was, and then you were able to gently bring him back into the fold. How beautiful.
Well, just in case you think I'm a saint who can do this all the time, I did feel defensive.
Okay, good. Well, that's even better.
And I said to myself, I wonder why I'm feeling so defensive right now, which is emotional regulation.
Mhm,
And
that's right.
that has come up really strongly through the pandemic, how people are completely out of touch with their emotions and how their emotions affect their behavior. So I'm like, I'm feeling really defensive about this. I feel really attacked right now. I'm thinking this as he's attacking me. And then I thought, what do we really need? Maybe we just need to breathe. And that came to me because I was able to name that I was feeling defensive and attacked.
Yeah.
And if I wouldn't have been able to do that, I would have been trying to think of ways to justify, oh, this is a great course. You're going to learn so much from it, stick with it. And that would have just turned him off, and everybody else too, because they were grieving.
Mm-hmm.
One of their colleagues died 2
Mm-hmm.
days ago, and they all knew this person. And,
Right.
so this is, none of that was acknowledged, I don't think, in their work. I mean, here they were 2 days afterwards, everybody's there just at work as if nothing happened.
Right.
And so this, I mean, I was aware of it, but I didn't feel it until I saw how distressed they were. And that distress hit me too. But I was able to say, whoa, this is how I feel. It must be so much worse for them. But I couldn't get there if I wouldn't have had any kind of emotional self-awareness.
Mm-hmm. And that is a beautiful role modeling for all of us, and what you and I are certainly both out to teach. So on that note, let's grab our last break. I'm Elise Cortez, your host. We've been on the air with Dr. Marie Gervais. She is the author of The Spirit of Work. She's also the CEO of Shift Management and the host of Culture and Leadership Connections podcast. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to the program. I'm Dr. Elise Cortez, your host. Before we get back into talking with Dr. Marie, I want to share one other bit of news, and that is the second book that I had brought out is called Passionately Striving and Why. And it's a collection of stories from women across the world, 25 stories of women that I went and found who share their intimate story of how they've discovered their purpose and are now serving from it. And it is beautiful and delightful. And the whole reason we did it was to be able to bring together and showcase that purpose works for anyone everywhere, regardless of your education, your background, your religion, your faith. And that when you actually draw from it, you can make a difference that really lifts the world. So I'm actually almost more proud of that book than my first book. So I hope you check it out. If you're just joining us, my guest today is Dr. Marie Gervais. She is the CEO of Shift Management, Inc. and the host of the Culture and Leadership Connection podcast and the author of The Spirit of Work, which we've been talking about. So for this next bit here, Dr. Marie, the last segment that we have here, I want to dive more deeply into some of the applications of your work. So specifically in chapter 2, you talk about using the language of virtues for building soul-sustaining workplace decision-making. How delightful. And you offer the idea that at the beginning of a meeting, choose a focus virtue from a virtues list and open the meeting with that. And also, you can also close the meeting with that. So can you talk a bit more about how you've seen or you recommend leaders and managers to use virtues inside organizations?
Well, three things that people need to be able to communicate effectively with each other. They need an emotions vocabulary, they need a virtues vocabulary, and they need a descriptive vocabulary.
Mm,
And so if you have those three vocabularies, you're equipped to actually communicate. And so the virtues vocabulary is something that you can build by first off being aware that there are virtues, which are the things that expand our human potential. They'd be things like leadership, love, appreciation, assertiveness, hope, all those kinds of things. And they're the opposite of vice, which would be, hatred, um, dissension, aggression. So the whatever you practice grows, and so when you bring the language of virtues into your workplace and you start using it, for example, just by saying, "Wow, that was just so generous of you. I really appreciate that." Or let's work on being cooperative here, even if we've had a rough day. How can we be cooperative? How can we practice cooperation? Or I'd like to honor you for steadfastness in this difficult thing we've been doing right now. So when you start using virtues in your vocabulary, people begin using them themselves. They may even say something like they don't know what that means, and then you can have a discussion about it. But just that is one way to practice it. And the other one is I have a virtues, it's called the Virtues Cards. It's an app, it's free on your phone. And you can just, say, I wonder what virtue would be helpful for us for our meeting today. And you shake the phone, and a virtue comes up, and you go, it's never anything you expected. And and so you can just say, well, let's see how this comes up. And at the end of the meeting, we'll see what happens. You can also use a card deck, which I use in my coaching. I have a card deck here, virtues cards, and I just go, so I wonder what would happen, in what you need right now in order to move forward in your life with what you've already identified. And then I choose randomly, and what comes up. This one came up, nobility, which is what we're talking about right now. Sometimes it's completely not what you expect at all. And then I say, what does that mean to you in your life, and how does that apply to the problem you want to solve? And it elevates the conversation.
yes.
So those are two simple ways that you can use it.
Hmm.
Another way that you can use it is in what I call the virtues sequence, which I discovered in the writings of three of the world religions. I'm sure I can find it in all of them. And it is very specific a mention of certain virtues in a certain order. And I think it is one of the clues to having better workplaces and just a better world. So the first two are love and truth. So if you don't start from a position of love, of wanting to actually care about the people, about yourself, about your environment, if that's not there, then you can't move forward with anything else. Truth comes when you love someone so much that you want to discover the truth. What's this like for you? How are you experiencing this? Is this safe for you? And then once you've got love and truth, you move into justice. And so you can't have justice if you don't have truth. You don't have justice if you don't have love. And from justice, you move into unity. You can't have unity without justice, because you can't just kiss and make up when you got people at different power differentials. And from unity, you move to peace. And from peace comes abundance. And that's when it naturally things start to become abundant for you, global prosperity kind of abundance, not just one person making money, but everybody. So if there's something going wrong, to look at the virtues sequence and say, what are we missing here? Are we missing truth? What's stopping us from that? Or what are we missing here? Are we missing some people's perspective so we don't have an equitable way to build unity? What are we missing here? Are we missing unity so we can't get to peace because we don't have unity of thought? So when you start asking those questions, it can be a useful tool.
Incredibly powerful, Dr. Marie. And the word that just keeps coming back to me is elevating. It's just elevating, right? Why would you want to just backstroke it when there's so much you could do and be as a human being to really make a contribution that's worthy of your one precious life? And these are all principles and resources that you're offering to be able to help people do that, which of course I greatly admire, and why I wanted to have you on the show. So the next thing I want to talk about that you speak to in your book, in one of the chapters, chapter 3, I think it is, it speaks in part to belonging. So I want to read again to that. And that's so important today, diversity, inclusion, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and now the B word, which is belonging. So important for people to feel like they belong in an organization. Otherwise, they can't contribute their best, or they don't want to stick around for that matter. So you write in your book, you say, this chapter examined the interdependence of purpose, belonging, spiritual principles, and outcomes. It considered the role of purpose, a fundamental spiritual question, in providing soul to the organization, and the concept of belonging as a benchmark for aligning principle with outcome. If purpose, belonging, spiritual principles, and outcomes match, we have a soul-sustaining organization. Where they find misalignment, there is yet work to do.
Yeah. What would you like me to say about that?
Well, I am interested as I queued it up. I know there's so much you could say. You wrote a whole chapter about it, but I'm interested in you focusing on the belonging piece.
Okay. So it's not whether I think you should feel like you belong. It's whether you feel like you belong.
Exactly right. Yeah.
So, and there's it's a book written by, let me see if I can just pull it up here. Now, of course, that I'm looking for it, I'm not seeing it. It's called Alpha Dog. Oh, here it is. Alpha Dog. Mark Beslin. Mark Beslin wrote this book. He's a construction supervisor, and he wrote several books. And he had this really interesting thing that he did where he said, do you feel like you're supported at work? Do you feel like you can speak openly to me? Or any other manager? Do you have the tools you need? Do you have the training that you need? And he asks people to sign off on those things.
Mm.
And if they can't, he says, what's missing and how can I help with that? And so to me, that you really feel like you belong when you go through that sign-off process with him. Can you imagine a construction crew manager coming up to you and saying, listen, have you got all this stuff? And if you don't, how can I help you with that? I don't think I've ever
Sounds
seen
good
it.
to me.
I mean,
Sounds good to me.
I'd sign me up. Let me work for this guy.
And I'd
So
like to live in the house that they create. Thank you very much. Or the
no
office that they design
kidding.
and to create. Yes.
No kidding, because it would be solid. It would be made to last. It would be made for people to live in. There wouldn't be any corners cut. Yeah.
Yeah, the belonging piece I've really come to see in my own consulting, Dr. Marie. I've seen it where I can see when I walk in, I can see who feels like they don't belong. They're quiet and they close in on themselves and they don't offer their ideas. They don't speak up, and very often they leave. It's just abundantly obvious who feels like they don't belong. So there is real work to be done in organizations to do this. So appreciate what you're doing about that.
One thing that's just helpful is just greeting people.
Oh, it goes.
Like just saying hello to someone and looking at them and greeting them like they matter. And oftentimes, I can't count how many people have told me that they left because nobody greeted them.
Oh, me too. I've done many engagement survey works for people, for organizations, and they said the leaders literally walk by with their heads down, and I'm just looking to see if they'll notice that I'm here.
Yeah. So, and now the thing is that not everybody is going to want to play the belonging game. They might not play nice in the sandbox. They may do everything they can to disrupt the team. So sometimes you may need to remove them and say, watch what's going on, or let's try something here that might feel it's better for you. And then we'll come back and talk about it again, because not everybody feels like they belong in the same way either.
Agreed. It's so beautiful, the work that you're doing. Just so great. And I'm aligned in so many ways. And you taught me something else as well, which is a big reason, as you know, as to why I keep doing the show. I love your SWELL model. So safety, well-being, encouragement, and learning as a foundation for mindful work. So let's talk more about that. Where did the model come from, and how do you apply it?
Well, it sprouted from my brain one time when I was trying to think, what's wrong with this picture and how could people get into the spirit of work without all the stuff around it, but can they find a way into the system? And I think safety is the best way in, but you could come in from anywhere. So if you learn something, or you are encouraged, or you encourage someone, or you're concerned about well-being, all of those things will help. But the reason I think safety is so important is because you can say, do I feel safe doing this? Have we created a product that everybody would be safe using? Do we offer a service that people can be safe to use and the people who are offering it feel safe to offer it. And as you know, from the birth to death life cycle of this product or service, is it safe for everybody involved? If you start asking yourself that question, you go right into the heart of the spirit of work. Ex-CEO Indra Nooyi, in her recent book talks about how when she was CEO, she decided to replace the 100-year-old cobblestone sidewalks because the women were catching their heels on it and falling, and also visitors that were coming to the PepsiCo company headquarters were tripping. Children were tripping, and people were tripping and falling. And she replaced them with sidewalks that people could walk on that were level and equal. She got a lot of pushback from many of the people that were there who said that she was going against tradition and history. And she said, but it's not safe. I mean, if it's not safe, why are we keeping it? And to me, that's the swell model. It's not safe. That's the question. You don't say it's not about tradition and history. Your tradition, your history, your memories, your nostalgia
Right.
that may have nothing to do with actual tradition. It may just be all in your imagination. Let's just go with what would be safe.
Right. And I really appreciate her pushing back on all that tradition. I mean, that's a mountain to push back on. So, and that's leadership, ladies and gentlemen. That's leadership. So we're
Yeah.
getting.
Sorry. When you feel safe, then you can move into well-being, and it's not about swag and gym memberships. It's about how can you contribute. And you won't want to contribute if you're not encouraged. We have a huge culture of criticism, and to replace even a slight little bit of that with encouragement would make a big difference. And then any organization that learns and people learning in that organization is going to bring it to the next level, which is why you're as accomplished as you are, because you keep learning.
Thank you. I think learning is sexy. So that's, part of the reason I keep doing it, hoping to be sexy. So we've already covered the importance of bringing your mind to work. We have just enough time here to talk a little bit about why you need to bring your heart to work. Can you address just a little bit of that?
Well, this whole emotional part of ourselves has been very much misunderstood and has been also put in the Western thinking, has been put into this kind of a box where whatever is rational is superior to everything else.
Right.
So superior to what your feelings are, to your sensations in your bodies, your reading the social realities. Somehow rationality is supposed to be independent of all that, which it isn't. It's about 10% of your brain and 10% of your thinking ability. So we are so handicapped in our thinking because we are not understanding our emotions. So I just used this yesterday. I went to my opticians to get my eyes examined, and they have a machine that blows air into your eyes. And
Yes,
every
I
time,
hate that. Yes.
so do I. And every time I have to sit at that machine, I start to get anxious or nervous about it.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
me
not
too.
huge. It's not like I can't push it down if I don't want to. But I thought, hey, you know what? I'm going to just say, you know what? I feel really nervous about this air blowing thing, and I accept that that's how I feel right now. And when I did that, the air blow just happened. I didn't even flinch. It didn't bother me. And she did the other eye. And the person that was working there said, wow, this hasn't happened to me before. I usually have to do several takes. What's your secret? I said, emotional regulation. I just said, I accept that I'm feeling nervous about this air going into my eyes right now. That's the way it is in this moment. And it just fixed itself on its own. And so when people think about emotions at work, they think about people going AWOL or, having fits and dissolving. But that's when people don't understand emotional regulation. And when they can name their emotions, when they can start to be aware of them, when they can start accepting and be compassionate with themselves and realize that all of their emotions are messages for them and they're all necessary, that's a part of being a human being, then they start moving into a space where they access thinking they couldn't access before because they
Yes.
were totally shut down.
Yes. Oh, what a fantastic way to finish, Dr. Marie. The show's listened by people across the world, and they're out to try to create workplaces where people actually want to come to work, give their best. We create inspirational leaders that lead them to their greatness, and we do business that betters the world. And say 15 seconds or less. What would you like to leave them with?
Oh dear, 15 seconds or less. choose to think and do soul enhancing things. Choose to do soul enhancing actions that will expand human potential.
Beautiful way to finish, Dr. Gervais. Thank you so very much. I am delighted to know you and have you on my show and share you with my listeners and viewers. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. Listeners and viewers, if you want to learn more about this amazing woman, Dr. Marie Gervais, her work at Shift Management, her recent book, The Spirit of Work, or the Culture and Leadership Connections podcast she hosts, start by visiting shiftworkplace.com. Last week, if you missed the live show, you can always catch a recorded podcast. We were on the air with Dr. Linda Gratton, one of the foremost global thought leaders on the future of work, and named Business Thinkers 50 as one of the top 15 business leaders and described as a rock star teacher. We talked about her recently published and fascinating book called Redesigning Work, How to Transform Your Organization and Make Hybrid Work for Everyone. Next week, we'll be on the air with he's not a doctor, I don't say per se, with Arnaud St. Paul, talking about his concept of heartful entrepreneurship and the importance of cultivating harmony in today's spiritually evolving workplace. See you there. And remember, work is an integral part of our lives, so let's work on purpose.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. Be sure to tune into Working on Purpose, featuring your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, each week on W4CY. Together, we'll create a world where business operates conscientiously, leadership inspires impassioned performance, and employees are fulfilled in work that provides the meaning and purpose they crave. See you there. Let's work on purpose.